Hello friends. Now we come to the modules on global Shakespeare. The first two modules present to you a conversation between Dr. Neeta Kumar and Professor Claire Cochrane of the University of Worcester in the UK. Professor Cochrane talks about Asian Shakespeare in the UK, companies like Tara Arts, which regularly produce performances of Shakespeare with a dollop of Bollywood or of other Indian elements. She also talks about racially blind casting in the UK, and I hope that this conversation will prove to you that Shakespeare is not just somebody to be studied in the classroom. Shakespeare is a playwright who even today attracts audiences all over the world and is performed in many different languages and many different theatrical styles. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Neeta Kumar, Secretary of the Shakespeare Society of India, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Professor Claire Cochrane from the University of Worcester. Professor Cochrane is here for the IP College and Shakespeare Society seminar on revisiting Shakespeare in Indian literature and culture. Professor Cochrane is the Professor of Theatre Studies at the University of Worcester in the UK. She, in addition to teaching Shakespeare, she is also interested in contemporary playwrights, and she is a theatre historian. Her most recent book, 20th Century British Theatre, Industry, Art and Empire, was published by the Cambridge University Press in 2011. Welcome to Delhi, Professor Cochrane.
Thank you for inviting me.
I must congratulate you on the wonderful presentation, the plenary lecture you delivered at the seminar today. And you gave us this picture of a very, very complex, and a very nuanced theatre scene in the UK, even though the Asian community in the UK you suggested was a relatively small one. Would you like to outline for us the Asian theatre in the UK in its contemporary scene?
Well, I mean, the Asian community is steadily growing, and in some cities, like my own city of Birmingham, for example, you have a large proportion of the population are now Asian and particularly of Pakistani heritage. But the largest concentration of migrants from the subcontinent you find in London. And that's where most of the theatre companies are based. Theatre companies have come and gone. It's not always easy to run a small-scale theatre company because you lose funding or you lose leadership and the company runs out of steam. So there have been various companies like the Asian Cooperative Theatre, for example, that came, flourished for a while, and then died. But the longest lived company is Tara Arts, which was founded in 1977 and became fully professional in 1982. But you've also got a company that was formed by two women called Tamasha Theatre Company and also Kali Theatre Company. Kali is particularly interesting because it focuses on the development of women Asian writers. So it has a development program. But both those companies give opportunities to British Asian actors as well as British Asian writers. Then you've got other companies near London. There's one called Rifco, for example. And further north in England, there's another company called Peshkar. But there's not very many. But there's certainly a growing number of British Asian actors who they appear a lot on television, but also increasingly in the theatre, in mainstream theatre productions.
Right. Thank you. Now, in the seminar that we have had for 2 days now, there has been a lot of talk about the long relationship that India has had with Shakespeare. To begin with, Shakespeare as part of the colonial enterprise of the imperial power, and the reception of Shakespeare in India. And many speakers have talked about a coming of age of our relationship with Shakespeare. Now, I understand, as you spoke in your presentation about this too, that the situation of Asian community in UK, their identity issues are even more complex, and therefore their relationship with Shakespeare is even more complex. Do you see a sort of development in the way Asian community has received and presented Shakespeare over the years? Do you think there is something like coming of age in that relationship? Are people more comfortable in their complexity? I mean, the Asian identity, which is very complex, is there more sort of comfort in itself and its relationship with Shakespeare?
Many Asian communities don't go to the theatre in the UK, and many theatres make a great deal of effort to reach out and to develop theatre product which is interesting and accessible for local community audiences. We've had an example now of an all British Asian production of Much Ado About Nothing by the Royal Shakespeare Company, which is really quite a major turning point, because something like this has never happened before. I mean, there have been popular projects like Bombay Dreams, for example, the musical that was in London in 2002, and there was a short-lived production of Twelfth Night with a largely Asian cast in 2004. But on the whole, British Asian theatre makers in their own companies, apart from Tara Arts, have tended not to present Shakespeare. I think the relationship remains very complex. I think there are still tensions around the history of the fact that Shakespeare was an imposed figure within the subcontinent during the 19th century. And I think for several of the key groups, their political aspirations, they're concerned to create a theatre that speaks to the contemporary issues within their own communities and within multicultural Britain is of greater importance. But there's no doubt about it that there are a number of key Asian actors that enjoy performing in Shakespeare. But until Iqbal Khan was asked to direct Much Ado About Nothing for the RSC, the usual pattern is, even with British Asian actors, you would still have a member of the white establishment that was directing. And I think the main thing that will have to change in the future is that you develop more British Asian directors, so there's more power and autonomy.
Okay, that leads me to my next question. How is the casting policy? Are Asian actors accepted in the mainstream British theatre? Is that casting, is it blind casting or is it race-aware casting?
Integrated casting or colourblind casting, which starts in the late 1980s, I think, and then starts to develop in the national companies and in the regional producing theatres. And I think most mainstream theatres are comfortable with that. I don't think colourblind casting is quite as radical or as extreme as it was. I mean, audiences of critics were upset when black British or British Asian actors were cast in kind of social realism of early 20th century northern playwrights, and it just seemed a bit illogical to do that.
Yes.
But certainly within classical drama, particularly within Shakespeare, but with also other Renaissance dramatists or with dramatists from the fairly modern European repertoire. More and more British Asian actors are being cast in these plays and of course making a major contribution.
Okay. If an Asian theatre company puts up a performance, is the audience composed largely of Asians, or do whites and other communities also take interest in the Asian theatre?
Marketing and performance development strategies have been quite hard and quite rigorous in a lot of Asian communities which tend to be quite enclosed. It's often been difficult to get people to come to the theatre. So white establishment theatre makers have had to be very sensitive, they've got to be very knowledgeable, their outreach policies have got to be informed. You know, you're not just thinking that just because you're putting on an Asian interest play, your Asian community will just automatically roll up and see it. Often that doesn't happen. I mean, for example, in Birmingham there was a high-profile adaptation of the Ramayana. A great deal of money was spent on it, and quite a lot of effort was made into attracting audience to go to it, but actually most of the Asian population of Birmingham weren't particularly interested. But when the show went to the National Theatre in London, where you've got an Asian population along with a complete melting pot of cultures and ethnicities within London, then the theatre going habit is much more entrenched, and it did extremely well there. And I think it's true to say that Asian audiences are attending more and more the work of small theatre companies. But you'll get people like me.
Yes.
You know, you'll get members of the white theatre going community that attend as well, just to support the work.
And what is the source of funding for these small Asian theatres?
Well, there's Arts Council funding,
Okay.
but as you know, we've had an economic crisis, and there are austerity measures, and public services in all sorts of ways are being cut back quite strictly, and this is happening within the Arts Council. So I think virtually every theatre company, even the most highly funded companies, have taken a major cut in their annual revenue. So there's a very real fear, I think, with the smaller companies, not just British Asian or black theatre companies, but with all small theatre companies, that the security of subsidy is gradually ebbing away. So everyone is being encouraged to be terribly entrepreneurial, getting sponsorship and patronage from all sorts of external sources. And it's quite stressful, I think. I think there will be a different model of supporting theatre companies, and how that will evolve over the next 10 years or so. I don't really know.
Would you like to give us a quick response on your experience of the 2 days of the seminar that you have attended, and then we will.
I think it's been fascinating. It's quite humbling. I mean, really, to be invited was amazing. When I said to everybody, I'm going to Delhi to give a paper on Shakespeare, that was extraordinary. And I think what's coming across is the passion of the Indian Shakespeare community. It's extraordinary. I mean, it makes me feel quite ashamed, really, that Brits can get quite cynical about this whole thing.
Yes.
But the passion, the innovation, the experimentation, the translation, the adaptation, and I think somebody said today that we're going beyond the post-colonial within the Indian context into something which is fully independent and creative in its own right, and Shakespeare is now